She didn't remember my name in high school. Now I run the company her father built. Funny how life works when you stop chasing and start building. I went to school with a girl named Rachel Thompson. I remembered her pretty clearly, hard not to, but I'm pretty sure she had no idea who I was back then. Rachel grew up fast. By high school, she was tall with broad shoulders, a slim waist, and that natural athletic build that made sports come easy for her. Me. I was a late bloomer, barely 5'6" by the time I graduated at 18, with skinny legs and a frame that didn't exactly scream athlete. Rachel took pride in how she looked. She always made sure she dressed sharp, every outfit like it was straight off a magazine cover. She had that effortless style that made people take notice. I, on the other hand, rolled into school each day in worn-out jeans and a baggy t-shirt, more focused on comfort than fashion. When a new school year started, it was like Rachel was the runway model of the hallway. People were actually excited to see what she'd wear. It was like she set the tone for everyone else. Meanwhile, I kind of faded into the background, never really standing out, just trying to get through each day without drawing too much attention. Rachel was a tennis star, no surprise there. She'd been swinging a racket since she was little, and with her height and natural strength, she had a clear edge over the other girls. Me. I was that kid always picked dead last in gym class. I wasn't bitter about it, okay, maybe a little, but I knew team sports weren't where I was going to shine. So I leaned into the stuff I was good at. I found my groove with long-distance running. It wasn't glamorous, but it was something I could do on my own terms without having to rely on anyone else. And when I wasn't running, I was buried in wires and circuits in my dad's garage, fixing up old electronics and building little gadgets just for the fun of it. Technology became my world. A world where I didn't have to worry about how fast I could throw a ball or whether anyone was watching. Rachel, meanwhile, ran with the crowd you'd expect. Football players, rich kids, fraternity guys. She always seemed to be in the middle of everything. My social calendar was, let's just say, wide open. But I didn't mind. I spent most afternoons with a soldering iron in hand and a head full of ideas. Every fall she showed up in a new car, sleek and shiny like it rolled out of a showroom. I showed up on a beat-up mountain bike I'd had since middle school. We actually sat next to each other in class. Last names put us side by side more than once, but in all 4 years she only spoke to me one time. It was during a test. She slid a paper across the desk and just muttered, "Here?" That was it. That was our one and only conversation. Her dad, Tom Thompson, ran Thompson Industries, a big manufacturing business that had been in the family for generations. Her grandfather started it, and now her dad was in charge, keeping it profitable and steady. The factory had become a local cornerstone, employing over 150 people from around town, including my own dad, who landed a job there after serving in the army. He worked as a machinist, hard-working, proud, never missed a shift. By the time Christmas break rolled around our junior year, I started feeling a quiet confidence building in me. Not the loud kind that makes people cheer for you in a stadium, but the kind that comes from knowing who you are and finding something you're good at. Over winter break, I swung by to visit my folks, and while I was in town, one of our old classmates threw a party. Figured why not? I hadn't seen most of those faces in years. That's where I ran into Rachel Thompson again. She looked incredible, still had that magnetic presence that made people turn their heads, but it was obvious she'd had way too much to drink. Her boyfriend was with her too, just as buzzed, and the way he was treating her, it didn't sit right. He was being rude, brushing her off like she didn't matter. She didn't take it quietly though. Right there in front of everyone, she slapped him across the face, turned to me and said, "I'm leaving. Can you take me home?" Next thing I remember, sunlight was slipping through the blinds. I woke up on the couch, still groggy from the night before. Rachel was in the guest room. I could hear her stirring, so I brought in some coffee and breakfast I'd made, toast with way too much grape jelly. She looked at me with that post-party confusion, her voice quiet. "I guess I went overboard last night. I can't remember much, just bits and pieces. Do I know you?" I gave her a small smile. "Yeah, you know me, but I'm guessing you don't remember. I'm Jake Mullen. We sat next to each other through most of high school. I was the skinny kid with glasses and a Star Wars t-shirt. A complete tech geek." Her eyes lit up a little as she tried to recall. "You're joking, right? You always had better grades than me. I think I might have borrowed your notes a few times." When I set the coffee and toast down beside her, she laughed. "There's so much jelly on this toast," she said, eyeing it. "You got a napkin? I'm probably gonna make a mess." I chuckled, teasing her a bit. "Don't worry about it. Grape jelly's my weakness. I practically run on the stuff." I headed to the kitchen to grab a napkin, but when I came back, sure enough, grape jelly was everywhere. She looked up sheepishly, trying to hide a smile. Told you I'd make a mess. That morning had a strange kind of magic to it. Unexpected, warm, like something out of a movie. And oddly enough, it turned out her dad, Tom Thompson, was the president of Thompson Industries, a local manufacturing company. The same company where my dad had worked for years. Small world, right? I spent the day reflecting on it all. Later that evening, I had an interview lined up at Thompson Industries. I hadn't worn a suit since graduation, so I'd picked up a new one just for the occasion. Despite the jelly-covered morning with Rachel, I felt a mix of nerves and excitement. I wanted to make a good impression. When I arrived at the office, my cousin Sarah greeted me. She and I had grown up close. Our moms are sisters, and she'd been working there for a few years. She was the kind of person who always knew how to make others feel at ease. Growing up, I used to tag along with my dad to work at the plant. I learned a lot just by watching him, how machines worked, how people worked harder. That stuck with me. Most kids my age were chasing careers in big cities, Chicago, Dallas, New York, but I never felt that urge. I wanted to build something here at home. Something real. When I sat down across from Mr. Thompson for the interview, I felt the weight of that goal settle in. I told him I was hoping for a summer internship at the company, something hands-on where I could really prove myself. I knew I wasn't owed anything. I'd earn it. We finish our work by 5, he said, so we don't take hours from the interns and support staff. Nobody earning less should be forced to stay late just to pick up the slack. I respected that. I could see why the company had such a good reputation. Then he looked at me and said, "Jake, would you mind sharing your analysis with me?" "Yes, sir," I replied, steadying my voice. "Of course." When Mr. Thompson asked me what I expected to be paid for the summer internship, I smiled and said, "Honestly, sir, I'll leave that up to you. I'm just grateful for the opportunity." That same day after our interview, I ran into Rachel again. She'd been opening up a lot lately, especially about how intense her tennis training had gotten. Always competitive, she mentioned she'd been pushing herself even harder these past few months. Joking, I said, "Well, how about I take you out to dinner? You've earned a little recovery." She smiled and said, "Sure, Jake. Pick me up at my place around 6:30? "You got it," I told her, and I meant it. We decided to keep things casual and headed to Leone's Pizza. Just a couple of beers, a hot slice, and plenty of stories. It was one of those rare, effortless nights, where conversation flowed and everything felt light. Rachel had a way of lighting up when she talked about tennis. I wasn't anywhere near her level of skill. I played sure, but more as a hobby, but I loved hearing her talk about it. It wasn't the sport so much as the fire in her voice when she did. She noticed my dress clothes and asked about them. I told her I'd had my internship interview that morning, explained how I'd been hoping for a shot with Thompson Industries for months now. "It went great," I said. "They offered me a summer internship starting in June. With a little luck, it might turn into something more permanent." She smiled but then looked at me with curiosity. "Did my name happen to come up during your meeting with my dad?" "Yeah," I admitted. "He asked if we were in the same graduating class." Rachel rolled her eyes and gave me this look, half annoyed, half amused. "And what did you say?" I shrugged. "Told him we were classmates, but we didn't really run in the same circles." She leaned back, studying me. "You know, you don't exactly match the profile of the guys I usually go for." I smirked. That's kind of the point. Eventually that evening had to end. She was heading back to college soon, and so was I. When we hugged goodbye, she had tears in her eyes. "This part always sucks," she whispered. But even after we parted, we stayed in touch. Every day. Phone calls, emails. We even exchanged Valentine's Day cards, filled with all those little notes people only write when they're in that early butterflies in your stomach kind of love. On June 1st, I officially started my internship at Thompson Industries. I was their first ever summer intern, and I couldn't have been more honored. The work fascinated me, especially learning how parts were manufactured and understanding the engineering behind it all. I took it seriously. This wasn't just a job to me, it was a stepping stone, maybe even the start of my future. One afternoon, I was heading out to meet Rachel again. This time it was at her parents' house. I made sure to dress sharp, pressed khakis, a clean button-down shirt, and pulled into their driveway at exactly 5:45. I wasn't going to risk being late. I rang the doorbell and was met by a polished woman in her mid-50s, Rachel's mom. She looked me up and down and said, "Yes? Can I help you?" "I'm here to see Rachel," I said politely. She didn't exactly smile. "Of course," she replied before turning her head slightly. "You know, you can always find someone with higher test scores." Before I could even react, Rachel stepped into the entryway. "Mom," she said firmly, Jake does have high scores. And he doesn't need to prove anything. Then she leaned closer and whispered, "You don't have to wait for me tonight." As Rachel's mom disappeared back into the house, I suddenly felt this knot twist in my stomach. My hands even started to tremble a little. I wasn't sure why she'd put me in such a tense spot like that, right there in front of her mom no less. Before I could fully process it, Rachel reached out gently and took my hand. "Come on, Jake," she said, her voice soft but sure. "It's been a while since we've spent real time together." Caught off guard, I turned toward the surprised couple who were still lingering in the entryway and offered a polite smile. "It was nice meeting you, Mrs. Thompson." As we stepped outside, my mind was spinning. "Rachel," I said, "I know tennis means a lot to you, but could we just take a second to talk about how I'm feeling in all this? I just want to know that what matters to me, matters to you too." She stopped walking, turning to look me in the eye. "I'm used to getting what I want, Jake," she admitted. "But I'm trying. I want to take your feelings into account before I act on impulse. I don't always think things through. You deserve better than that." I appreciated her honesty even if it stung a little. To break the tension, I changed the subject. "We haven't caught up in a while. What have you been up to today?" She smirked and leaned into her usual playful tone. "Oh, so now you're curious? Is this your way of saying you've missed me?" I laughed. "Yeah, actually it is. I have." Even though we were still figuring things out, it felt good to hear her voice, to be with her again even for just a moment. That summer, Rachel took a job up in Wisconsin helping run a tennis camp. She wore a bunch of different hats: coaching, cleaning, even babysitting for some of the younger kids. It was classic Rachel, always diving in headfirst. We stayed connected through phone calls and letters. It wasn't the same as being together, but it helped bridge the distance. Meanwhile, back at Thompson Industries, I started noticing some cracks in the system. I was just an intern, but I had eyes and ears like anyone else. There were whispers around the shop about John, one of the senior managers, dipping into company funds to finance his own late-night adventures. Bar tabs, parties, things that had nothing to do with business. Word was Robert, one of the other brothers in the company, turned a blind eye. Maybe it was loyalty, or maybe he was just trying to protect John's family. I don't know. But it didn't sit right with me. Then there was Sam, the youngest brother. He was brilliant in his own way, but quiet, almost painfully introverted. He struggled with communication, and the truth is, a lot of his ideas ended up buried under the noise of louder voices. It was frustrating. Some of the shop guys had real ideas, solutions that could improve production or cut costs, but they were rarely taken seriously. Suggestions would get passed from Robert to John, who'd toss them to Sam, and then the whole thing would just disappear. Dead ends everywhere. At one point, I even considered filing a patent on behalf of the company for a process improvement I'd thought up, something I'd learned back in college while studying patent law. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized it probably wouldn't go anywhere. Around here, good ideas didn't always rise to the top. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was meant to do more than just clock in and keep quiet. Even if nobody else saw it yet, I knew I had something to offer. I just had to figure out how to prove it. It was around this time that Robert Thompson pulled me aside and gave me some advice I wasn't expecting. He told me to keep quiet about some internal matters he'd shared, particularly around his brother John. Robert was worried John might try to sabotage any progress I was making. He even suggested we reroute some financial deductions, discreetly, to my own side venture, which we decided to name Mullen Marketing. He also brought up another opportunity, a house the bank was trying to unload. It wasn't much to look at, needed a fair bit of fixing up, but the bones were solid. With some of the money I'd earned from patent-related work, I was able to put together a down payment and buy the place. For the first time in my life, I was a homeowner. Robert and I agreed that I'd keep working at the plant, but the house became a personal project. Rachel didn't love it at first, said the place felt cold, uncomfortable. She suggested I hire a crew to finish the renovations faster, maybe make it feel more like a home. But I was stretched thin. My role at Thompson Industries was growing, and I had responsibilities now, reports to deliver, deadlines to hit, and pressure from the board to keep momentum going. We couldn't see eye to eye on the house, so I booked Rachel a room at the Hyatt to give her some space, and that night, we enjoyed a quiet evening together. In between her summer tennis tournaments, Rachel would drop in to surprise me. We'd steal a few days together before she had to hit the road again. When it came to work, I paid every employee fairly and made sure we had all the materials we needed. By getting behind the patents I'd helped file, we managed to launch the first full production run at Thompson Industries, and surprisingly, I generated more new business than the actual marketing department. Rachel visited again not long after the launch, and despite being worn out from travel, she noticed how much more organized the house had become. She decided to walk away from her father's plan for her to go into medicine and instead threw her support behind the manufacturing side, something I never expected. I teased her once, half-jokingly asking for a slice of the dividends she might see from all the work. She shot me a look and said, "Keep it up and I'll send you back to cleaning floors." We both laughed, but I knew behind that tough shell she was proud of what we were building. A few months later I got a phone call from her late at night. She was crying, shouting things I couldn't even understand. I asked if I should come and through broken words she said yes. I booked a ticket right away and flew out that same evening. When I got to her hotel room she was sitting on the bed, her right leg wrapped in an ice pack. She'd taken a nasty fall and twisted her ankle. Bad enough to put her tennis season, maybe her career, on hold. I stayed by her side helping her get through the first shock of it. "We'll get through this," I told her. "It's just a detour, not the end." She ended up coming home with me to recover, and while she couldn't play competitively anymore, she took a coaching job at a local high school. She threw everything into it, teaching, motivating, showing those girls what tennis was really about. Her drive, her energy, it rubbed off on them. That season, the team won the state championship. Rachel also used the school's resources to aid her own recovery. Physical therapy, focused training, it was like she turned coaching into her own form of rehab. I could see the fire still burning in her. At one point she brought up something unexpected: sterilization. I never asked for it, never suggested anything, so I couldn't help but wonder if that decision came from something deeper inside her. Maybe it wasn't about us, but about something she'd carried with her long before we ever reconnected. Eventually, Cameron and Cody came into our lives, and that changed everything. After Cameron and Cody joined our family, things changed in ways I didn't expect. My mom and grandmother, always the type to pitch in when needed, immediately stepped up. Rachel was a bit unsure of herself in the beginning. Motherhood doesn't come with a manual, and she accepted their help with quiet gratitude. My grandmother, despite being well into her 70s, had the energy of someone half her age. She adored kids and started spending almost every weekday at our house, arriving around 8 a.m. and staying until dinner. Rachel often joked that she had a live-in nanny without the paycheck, and for a while, everything felt like it was finally falling into place. But it didn't last. As time went on, Rachel became more irritable. What started as occasional comments turned into constant criticism. Nothing in the house seemed good enough, from the paint color on the walls to the cabinet space in the kitchen. Even the heirlooms I'd inherited from my family, things that meant a lot to me, were declared too tacky for her taste and boxed up out of sight. I tried to help. I really did. I took out the trash, folded the laundry, did whatever I could to pitch in. But every time I did, it was wrong. Not folded the right way. Not the right trash bags. She'd sigh, roll her eyes, and redo everything with a look that made me feel like a failure in my own home. At some point, I started to wonder if there was something deeper going on. That suspicion, quiet at first, started growing. I noticed things I hadn't paid attention to before. Odd phone calls. Late nights with vague explanations. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't ignore the signs. On the advice of a private investigator, someone I'd reluctantly hired, I picked up a discreet tool to collect possible evidence. There was one moment that stood out. Instead of cleaning something suspicious myself, I sealed it and sent it to a lab for testing. DNA confirmation. I felt sick. While all this was happening, Rachel became obsessed with buying a house in the upscale country club district. It was a massive place, far beyond what we could reasonably afford. But she was determined. She claimed it was everything her mother never had and more, and that made it worth it. There was just one problem. She couldn't get the loan without showing proof of my income. We were at an impasse. That's when Craig, our attorney, suggested drafting a prenup-style agreement even though we were technically still married. It was a financial separation document, really. I would waive any claim to Rachel's assets, including the shares she inherited from the Thompsons, and in exchange I wouldn't have to appear on any of the property documents or loans. Still, the mortgage had to be paid and I was expected to handle half the monthly cost, plus insurance. I tried to give her advice. She didn't want it. Once the property was divided, I turned my focus back to work, specifically to John Thompson's mounting financial issues. His life was spiraling. Between parties, cars, and constant drinking, he'd racked up more debt than anyone knew. His wife, Sherry, showed up at my office one afternoon in tears, worried that her marriage wouldn't survive his reckless behavior. She didn't know what to do. Despite how John had treated me in the past, I tried to be there for him. I let him know I wasn't giving up on him, even if he didn't trust me at first. Then there was Sam, the youngest of the Thompson brothers. One evening after work, I found him sitting in the break room looking worn down. I asked him what was bothering him, and to my surprise he opened up. He told me the pressure was getting to him. That he'd been relying on antidepressants just to keep going and was afraid of what it might be doing to his health. It was the first time I'd ever seen him that vulnerable. I listened. No judgments. Just support. Sometimes what people need isn't a fix, it's someone who simply hears them. After Sam Thompson opened up to me about how overwhelmed he'd been feeling, I promised him I'd do everything I could to support him. I was genuinely curious about where he saw himself going, so I asked, "What are your long-term goals, Sam?" He looked at me, exhausted but honest. "Jake, I just want peace. I'm tired. I just want something steady." That stuck with me. So, when I mentioned the idea of a lifetime contract that would pay him $10,000 a month, Sam looked like he might burst into tears. He practically shouted, "Are you serious?" I could see the weight lift off his shoulders in that moment. Craig, our legal counsel, had his reservations. At that rate, it would take him nearly 50 years to earn what his shares are worth, he pointed out. And truth be told, Sam's health isn't great. He probably doesn't have another 10 years in him. I nodded. You're right. But maybe that's exactly why this makes sense. At least he'd enjoy those years. Really live. Craig gave me a half smile and a firm handshake. Congratulations, Jake. You've just gained full control of Thompson Industries. I thanked him, quietly, humbly. It was a moment I never imagined I'd live through. I wasn't born into this. I didn't inherit it. I earned it. Back at the office, I asked Sally, our administrative lead, to send out the formal 14-day notices to all shareholders. We had a meeting coming up to discuss several critical issues: renewing shareholder appointments, changing leadership roles, and approving the third-quarter dividend strategy. Sally looked a little overwhelmed. There's a lot happening that I haven't been briefed on. Should I be worried? I smiled gently. Let me catch you up. I bought out both John and Sam's shares. I now hold the majority. At the next shareholders' meeting, everything unfolded as planned. We voted on approving the transfer of shares from both Thompson brothers to me. I was officially named president and chairman of the board. Then, based on the quarter's numbers and upcoming investments in new machinery, we decided unanimously not to distribute dividends. Every motion passed without objection. The meeting ended without fanfare, but the weight of it lingered. My father stood up and gave me a proud nod before quietly leaving the room. That gesture meant more than any applause. But the calm didn't last long. Moments after the doors had closed, Rachel stormed into the boardroom, her lawyer in tow. Her voice thundered across the room, "Get out of my father's office." I stood up slowly, letting her anger roll through the room like a wave. Then I calmly walked to the wall behind her and pointed at the framed portraits. Her grandfather. Her father. And now me. She turned and her breath caught. For a second, the fire in her eyes dimmed. The reality of it hit her hard. She no longer had the fallback she once believed was permanent. With her father's shares gone, she was no longer the heiress to anything. The mansion, the car leases, the country club dues, even the grocery bills, none of it was sustainable anymore. She'd never had to worry about money, but now the world looked different. Later that evening, after things had settled and her lawyer had gone, she approached me in a quiet, worn-out tone. "How about a glass of wine?" she asked, not in anger this time, but something closer to surrender. I nodded. "Yeah, I'd like that." I didn't raise my voice when I answered Rachel. I just kept my tone calm and direct. No point in circling around the truth. She tilted her head, almost amused. "You might not have blown anyone away at Thompson Industries, Jake," she said. "But somehow you managed to push the company forward 20 years faster than any of us expected. How did you convince my brothers, two of the most clueless people I know, to hand over their shares?" I gave her a small smile. It wasn't that hard. I just listened. To what they needed, to what they were afraid of. And I gave them a way out. She leaned back, laughing to herself. Well, it was genius. Now the whole company's in our hands. Just you and me. She popped a bottle of champagne she'd brought with her, like we were celebrating some grand victory together. But I wasn't in the mood to toast to something that didn't feel like a shared win. "There's something else," I said, pulling out a thick folder. "I hired a private investigator. He's been following you, quietly, respectfully, at tennis events over the last year." Rachel's expression froze. I opened the folder and laid it on the table between us. Photos, videos, time-stamped reports. "It's all here," I said. "Plenty of proof to contradict your claims." Her face turned pale. I could see her brain scrambling, reaching for a new angle. "If you divorce me, Jake," she said quickly, "you'll owe child support. You know that, right? Staying married would be smarter, for you." I just smiled, not out of cruelty but because the weight of the situation had finally shifted. "You remember our prenup," I replied, "and so does the court." She tried another angle. "You're hardly around. You spend most of the year traveling for work. How can you say you're present for the boys?" I reached into the folder again. "I keep records, Rachel. Dates, overnights, visits. And this investigator? He's not just a photographer. He collected DNA evidence from the things you brought back from your trips." Her eyes darted down to the page as I continued. 3 different samples. 3 different men. And the lab confirmed it. That's not just infidelity, it's reckless. You put our family at risk. At that, she went silent. Eventually, Rachel packed up and left town. There wasn't much left for her here. Little capital, fading connections, and mounting debt. Witnesses said she slipped away quietly. No goodbye. Just gone. Honestly, I felt a wave of relief. There was no more pretending, no more waiting for the next emotional ambush. I no longer had to justify myself to someone who weaponized affection and blurred every boundary we ever set. These days, I'm focused on the company. With over $20 million in capital, Thompson Industries is thriving under new leadership, and more importantly, with clarity of purpose. I'm not just surviving anymore. I'm building something real. And Rachel? Last I heard, she was still playing tennis in LA, trying to restart a life that had long unraveled. But I'm no longer a part of that story, and I'm grateful for it.